Are you ready for a show that talks sports from the fans' point of view?
We've seen Michael Jordan score 37 points a game in his era. How many could he score in today's NBA?
There's not a player out there who I'd rather have than LeBron James.
Are you ready for a show that isn't afraid to challenge anyone when it comes to sports? If Adam Silver really wanted to fix tanking in the NBA, he would stop rewarding teams by giving them the best chance to win the draft lottery.
I mean, how many times will Roger Goodell drop the ball on handling domestic violence in the NFL?
Look, athletes have every right to talk politics, but if the fans stop tuning in, that's their right.
Then you're ready for Talk Back, a podcast where two fans debate the media narrative and discuss the world of sports as we see it.
Welcome to the show.
It's time for another edition of Talk Back. I'm one of your hosts, Eric Nesbit, and with me is Justin Gay, your host and director of content, probably directing us right through those AFC and NFC championship games this past weekend in the NFL. But Justin, I hope you do a better job of directing this show than the NFL can do of directing their officiating. I think we have a lot to talk about. It's episode 234 of Talk Back, all NFL, Saints, Rams, Patriots, and Chiefs. Who were the ones going to the Super Bowl and who were the ones going home? We've got all of that and more on this edition of Talk Back.
Well, we are back here for segment one on episode 234, and it's time to talk about what happened this past Sunday in the NFL Conference Championship games. And let's start with the NFC. And Eric, this may go down as one of the best days of football ever, as for the first time in league history, you had two overtime games on the same day in the playoffs, obviously in the same day here in the conference round. But let's start with where Sunday started, and that was in New Orleans with the Rams and the Saints. And we can't sugarcoat it. You can't bury the lead, as we've said before. So I'm going to come right out and ask you, Eric, did the referees change who's going to Super Bowl 53?
Well, we had an interesting text going back and forth, and I think both of us kind of just let it go at that time on Sunday because we knew rather than going back and forth on text, it was going to be fodder for the show. So I don't think either one of us wanted to steal the other one's thunder and see what we'd get into here this week on Talk Back. But yeah, I have to say that the referees played a part in changing the outcome of that game. Now, as we've said before, when we talk about these fourth down conversions, when teams go for it on 4th and 1, seems like odd situations. You never know what would actually happen after that. So do they call that pass interference and the Saints go on to score or ultimately win the game? We don't really know that. So it's hard to say that the NFL definitely changed the outcome of that game. However, the NFL officiating crew absolutely blew that call. Whether you're a Saints fan, a Rams fan, if you're truly objective, you cannot look at that play and say that the call wasn't blatantly missed. Now, what were the motivations? Was it an honest mistake? A lot of people saying bang, bang play. Justin, we can debate that in a minute. I don't think so. I don't think it's a bang, bang play personally. But yeah, the refs blew that call. And to go on to maybe score, maybe not, but the Saints feel like that game was stolen from them, and I have to empathize with Sean Payton and his crew.
There was 1:45 left on the clock when that play ended, and there was no penalty. The Rams had one timeout. So there's technically 3 penalties, but we'll say 2. Could have called pass interference, and he could have called helmet-to-helmet contact on the play. Either one of them would have resulted in an automatic first down. So a minute 45, Saints get the ball. They run a play. Let's say it's 3 seconds. That's a minute 42. Rams call their last timeout. Saints run their second down play. That's another 3 seconds. Now we're at what? A minute 39, 40 seconds bleed off the clock. We're at 59 seconds when they snap the ball on 3rd down. Then you're going to run another 40 seconds off the clock on your 4th down play, kick your field goal. The Rams are going to get the ball back in that situation with about 15 seconds left on the clock, roughly, with no timeouts, down by 3 points. So this is not a offsides call in the first series of a game. This isn't a holding call in the second quarter. This call had massive implications on this game. So when I hear people say, and I put it on Twitter, when I hear people and analysts and see it on Twitter, people say, well, there's more. You shouldn't put it in the referee's hands. These were the best two teams in the NFC. Vegas had this game as basically a pick 'em on a neutral site. It was 3 points for the home team, that being the Saints. So if they were on a neutral site, probably would have been a pick 'em, maybe a half point either way. But to sit there and say that that particular play didn't have massive ramifications, it absolutely did. Look, could the Saints have fumbled a ball on an exchange if they've gotten a first down? Could they have missed the field goal? Yes, all those things could have happened. But the fact of the matter is, it would have taken a miracle at that point for the Rams to get back in the game. Eric, I think it came down to the fact that they swallowed their whistle at the end of the game because they didn't want to make a call like that to allow a team to go to the Super Bowl on a penalty. In fact, what they did was that exact thing. It opened the door for the Rams to get to the Super Bowl on that blown call. That's where I think I have a problem, and I think Saints fans have a problem, because you took such a great game and you took a blatant penalty, 2 penalties at that point they could have called, and you swallowed your whistle and you didn't make that call, and you've changed the outcome. That's where I have a problem with it. Is this was not just a normal penalty. It was a situational penalty that had massive ramifications. And to sit there and compare it to any other play in the game, yes, the Saints should have scored more touchdowns and they should have put themselves up more, but they're playing another opponent that's trying to stop them. And with all that said and done, they put themselves in a position to drive that ball down and be able to bleed the clock out. And that was taken from them by a referee. And I just don't see now how the league can just continue to go forward with these kind of mistakes. We as fans have sat and watched football since September. And now all of a sudden you have to question who's even going to the Super Bowl. Now, I personally think the Rams will probably give the Patriots a better game in the Super Bowl. And we'll get into that next week on the show. So it's not even from that standpoint. It's just who deserved to win that game. And I just felt at that point the Saints had done everything they had to do in that moment. They had fought through all that adversity to put themselves in that position, and it was taken from them.
I really can't argue with that position at all. In fact, when you brought up the helmet to helmet, when that happened, I actually thought that they were going to get that call first on a defenseless receiver, because that defender, he did not have his head looking at the pass, looking at the incoming football at all. In fact, he was facing the receiver dead on toward the sideline, absolutely lit him up. And the ball was still, I would say, a good 4 to 5 yards away. So there comes the pass interference call as well, with the ball really not being anywhere close. It wasn't a bang-bang play, in my opinion. But as you brought up, I thought maybe they'd get that targeting call of that helmet-to-helmet or that hit on a defenseless receiver. But let me ask you this, Justin, because I know this is a hot topic. One of the things that I think we were sort of disagreeing on the text, and not really that we had necessarily two different sides, but we hear a lot of people say, well, the NFL just wanted LA to go to the Super Bowl. They wanted a big market team in the Super Bowl. Not that the Saints aren't big market, but, really they aren't. They're not LA. They're not New York. They're not one of those teams. They're a popular team. But do you feel like there's any narrative here, or was this just, in the moment, an independent referee made a bad decision with a no call, and there's really not any way for him or her to gauge, okay, I've got a minute and a half left. I got to do something because the NFL told me I've got to impact this game. I got to figure out something. Oh, there it is. There it is. That's where I draw the line, because with some of those conspiracy theorists out there, I just don't think in sports, I know we've talked about that in basketball in the past, I don't think in sports as a referee, you have that many instances throughout the game that wouldn't become really obvious if you were starting to do that kind of thing. Plus, it's sports. It's random. Anything can happen. You don't know as a referee, okay, I've got 10 more calls in the game. I got to get one of those twisted so that the Rams go to the Super Bowl. I just don't think you can calculate something like that as a referee. But the bigger issue is, does the NFL, in my opinion, yes, need to go to a full-time officiating crew that works for the NFL? Some of these refs are accountants. Some of these refs are businessmen. Some of these refs, they have trade jobs. Some of these, they do something else basically 6.5 days of the week other than the time that they're refereeing. I just think that NFL, as a billion-dollar industry, could afford to hire a full-time referee crew and at least have the oversight, training, and ability to come down on these guys when something so blatant happens. I don't know, Justin. This is a bad look. And I've got another question for you about the Rams, but give a response to what I've said so far as it relates to the NFL, the referees, and is there a fix here at all?
Do I think that Roger Goodell and the upper management of the NFL is at Park Avenue saying that they should do something to manipulate the games to get the Rams? I don't think that's the case. The problem is it was such an egregious error on the call. It opens the door for people to start to think that way, because it was such a bad call. And you have two officials that aren't that far away from the play, and neither one of them made a call. So I think that's part of the problem. I mean, the NFL already has 24 of their 121 officials full time. So should they have more? I don't know. Maybe. I mean, what are these guys going to do to simulate play? Are you going to put them out at practices for teams so that they can be in real speed of games? Because just watching film and trying to figure out what they did wrong or errors in the past, I don't necessarily know if that's going to make them any better on the field, or is it going to make it so that the gameplay is so bad that you're going to get more holding penalties and more things that slow the game up. So that's sort of my problem there. Eric, I think it's a pretty easy fix at this point. I just think you make any penalty that is 15 yards or more reviewable. So you're not going to do defensive holding and holding at the line and offside, anything like that. That's, you kind of see it and you know it's going to happen. I mean, very rarely are there holding penalties on the line that you don't say, okay, they are, that I can buy that. I mean, it's rare. It's probably 8 or 9 out of 10 are blatant, obvious fouls, and there's a lot that gets let go. But pass interference calls, there was a roughing the passer call. We'll talk in the next segment when we talk about the AFC championship game that happened. I feel like those type of things, if they're called or not called, that you should be able to challenge them or they should be reviewable. And pass interference falls in there. That if Sean Payton could have been able to challenge that play, and you throw that in there because that play wouldn't have been 15 yards, but pass interference calls can be 40 yards, 50 yards. They can change a drive and can change a game. And I feel like those type of things need to be allowed to be reviewable. You don't need to review every penalty. You need to review game-changing type penalties. And 15-yard penalties and automatic first downs on pass interferences or late in games, or even inside of 4 minutes in the fourth quarter, that you can make anything reviewable at that point. There just has to be something where we don't sit as fans and watch 19 weeks of football or invest 3+ hours in a game, and we feel like we didn't get to see the actual team that deserved to win. I think that's the whole problem I have. And I think there's fixes out there that won't slow up gameplay, but they've got to do something. And I think they will, because the outcry is so dominant that something's got to happen. And that doesn't take anything away from the Rams. I mean, they hung in there. They got down in this game 13-0. They battled back. They fought adversity as well. But I'm just not sure if they would have even had a chance to win had the proper call been made at that point. So that's sort of my take on what the referees are. But you mentioned talking about the Rams. What did you think about Jared Goff's play? We've talked about him seemingly all year. He had his ups, he had his downs. Now he's got 2 straight playoff wins. He'll go to his first Super Bowl. But how big was he on Sunday, and how impressed were you with his performance?
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought it over to the Rams, because I do have that second question, and it kind of has to do with Jared Goff and some of the other members of the team that had nothing to do with that play. So as you mentioned, Goff had a good game, 25 of 40, 297 yards with a touchdown. He only took 1 sack, and I think that shows a lot of maturity from a guy like Goff, who really struggled his first year or two with getting the ball out and not making dumb mistakes in the backfield that cost them yardage. I liked that. Obviously, they had a big production from Cooks. They even had Reynolds coming in. I didn't see that coming personally. Everett did a nice job. CJ Anderson, nice job. I mean, it was hard going. And I got to give you props, because you said right up front, this isn't going to be one of those 40 to 45 type point games. And I said on Twitter, you called this for the mid to low 20s. And here we are, 26 to 23, even through an overtime. That's the final score, because you just didn't see these guys running all over each other. I thought Goff did a really nice job. I thought he showed a lot of maturity, and he showed a lot of poise. And that's why I kind of worry for the Rams that the overall team accomplishment, the ability that Sean McVay has to get this team so quickly to where they wanted to be in the Super Bowl, with a young quarterback who has made enormous strides over the past year, none of those guys were the one guy on defense who blew that receiver up and had a no call against him that changes this whole narrative. So 52 other guys on this roster did everything they could to get the Rams to the Super Bowl. And I just feel like it's a little bit cheapened for Goff and Anderson and Cooks and all these guys, McVay, they deserve to be there because as a team and as an organization, they did everything through the season, had the best record, at least other than the Saints, to go into this game. And like you said, the two best teams, and they end up victorious. I feel like people are kind of taking a little bit of their shine, a little bit of their glory away because of one guy